Good evening, you're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. With a wide participation from the Sultanate and GCC countries, the activities of the 4th edition of the annual Al-Bashir Arabian Camel Racing Festival concludes at Al-Bashir Camel Racetrack in the Wilayah of Adam. The British Prime Minister says the G7 is exploring the pandemic preparedness treaty and the United States is backed as leader of the free world. And the net direct foreign investment in Sultanate increases by 12% during the first 9 months of 2020. Those are the headlines, and now for the news in detail. The activities of the 4th edition of the annual Al-Bashir Arabian Camel Racing Festival concluded at Al-Bashir Camel Racetrack in the Wilayah of Adam in Al-Dakhliya Governorate. More details in the following report.
The participating camels lined up behind the curtain at the starting point, all waiting for the moment to announce the launch of the closing day of the 4th annual Al-Bashir Arabian Camel Racing Festival, to earn the honor of winning the first places of the 4th rounds of this day. Sensation and suspense were present throughout the course of the first round, which was devoted to the category Thanaya Car Corps. The competition intensified in the last 100 meters, but the Camel Al-Asima, owned by Al-Bashir Corps and led by the trainer Musa bin Ali Al-Jahafi, grabbed the first place and won this round.
الكاس ولا بلا ما يصح الا الصحيح ما يصح الا الصحيح سلام يا سيدي سلام يا سيدي مشكور يا سيدي يا ابو تيمور على هذا الفوز.
The second round was allocated for the category Al-Thanayab Car General, and after a strong competition, the Camel Al-Khawara, owned by Mohammed bin Mubarak Al-Shamsi from the United Arab Emirates, came first and won this round. As for the third round, which was allocated for Al-Hul General category, the Camel Mayasa, owned by Hamad bin Muhammad Al-Wahibi, grabbed the lead and won the first place and the silver sword of this round.
All the camel owners look forward every year for such an event, and this event today is the end of this event, and it is one of the biggest events in not just in Oman but all the GCC countries.
In the last round, which was allocated for Al-Hul Core category, the competition intensified between the participating camels, but the Camel Muzna, owned by the Royal Corps and led by the trainer Hamad bin Muhammad Al-Wahibi, came first and won the golden sword of this round.
سلام سلام للهجانة سلام سلام الهجانة سلام السيف الذهب الذهب مع الذهب.
At the end of the festival, the trophies were distributed to the winners. Indeed, Al-Bashir Annual Camel Racing Festival contributes to reviving this authentic cultural heritage, which also represents a valuable economic source of livelihood for camel owners, trainers, and breeders. From Al-Bashir Camel Racetrack in the Wilayah of Adam, صالح بن خلفان الرحبي, الداخلية Governorate.
The Undersecretary of the Ministry of Labour discussed plans for implementing Omanization in the communications and information technology sector. The Undersecretary of the Ministry of Labour discussed in his meeting with human resource managers in the private sector the plans for Omanization and the challenges it faces in employing Omanis in the communications and information technology sector, and a mechanism for qualifying and training job seekers. The The net direct foreign investment in the Sultanate increased by 12% during the first 9 months of last year, as to reach more than 15,658 million Omani riyals. The National Center for Statistics and Information pointed out that the foreign investment flows amounted to 1,644 million riyals. The increase in foreign investments were in oil and gas exploration activities, industry sector, financial brokerage, and real estate activities. The main index of Muscat security market resumed its rise last week after 3 weeks of decline. It closed at the end of last Thursday's session at 3,565 points, increasing by 6 points. The financial sector index recorded the best performance, increasing by 62 points, as industry sector retreated by 29 points. The service sector index lost 20 points, while legitimate market index recorded an increase by 2 points. The value of trading last week amounted to 6.9 million riyals, while a number of executed deals from 2,791 to 1,823 deals. The World Bank is working with International Monetary Fund to find ways to solve two global problems, namely the need to reduce and restructure debt burden in several poor countries and the importance of reducing fossil fuel emissions, which contribute to climate change. Ethiopia, Chad, and Zambia started negotiations with debtors within the framework of a process being supported by the 20 group, which may lead to deducting debts in some cases. Coronavirus pandemic has caused retreats in expectations in some previously debt-burdened countries, causing reductions in revenues, increase in expenditure, and delay in vaccination rates compared to advanced economies. Still to come in a news bulletin. Indonesia capital is slammed by monsoon floods. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday said the group of 7 industrialised nations had agreed to explore a treaty on pandemic preparedness, working through the World Health Organization WHO. In a virtual address to the annual Munich Security Conference, he said such an agreement would enshrine the actions that countries need to take to safeguard their populations against another deadly pandemic. He commended the heroic endeavours of the scientists who developed COVID-19 vaccines in barely 300 days. Going forward, Johnson suggested countries should pool together their resources to develop vaccines against emerging diseases in 100 days. He added that they all have lessons to learn from an experience that none of them would want to repeat. Meanwhile, in his first big appearance as president on the global stage, an online virtual visit to Europe, Biden sought to re-establish the United States as a multilateral team player after 4 years of divisive American-first policies under Trump. Speaking to the Munich Security Conference, the Democratic president distanced himself from the more transactional foreign policy of Republican Trump, who angered allies by breaking off global accords and threatening to end defense assistance unless they toed his line. The novel coronavirus has killed more than 2.45 million people since the outbreak emerged in China in December 2019. At least 110.7 million cases of coronavirus have been registered. Of these, around 67.9 million are now considered recovered. Yesterday, 10,963 new deaths and 413,697 new cases were recorded worldwide. The United States is the worst affected country with 495,804 deaths. After the US, the hardest hit countries are Brazil with 244,765 deaths, Mexico 178,965, India 156,212, and Britain with 119,920 deaths. Europe overall has 825,560 deaths, Latin America and the Caribbean 655,235, Asia 251,204, the Middle East 102,042, and Africa 100,718 deaths. 3 separate explosions in the Afghan capital Kabul today killed at least 5 people and wounded 2 others, aimed a surge in violence in the war-torn country. A Kabul police spokesman said the first 2 explosions took place 15 minutes apart, and a third targeting a police vehicle took place 2 hours later. The majority of bomb attacks in the capital Kabul in recent months have been sticky bombs, explosive devices that are attached to vehicles and detonate by remote controls or timers. The second explosion targeted a car in a northwestern Kabul neighborhood in which National Army soldiers were traveling, killing 2 soldiers. A civilian passerby was also killed. The third explosion destroyed a police car in western Kabul, killing 2 police officers. Meanwhile, the first blast targeted a civilian car, wounding both travelers inside the vehicle. The Daesh group's local affiliate has claimed responsibility for some of the attacks, but many go unclaimed, with the government putting the blame on the Taliban. The insurgents have denied responsibility for most of the attacks. Indonesia capital and its surrounding cities were hit by severe flooding today, forcing at least 1,000 people to flee their homes. In Tangerang, a city part of the Greater Jakarta Metropolitan, hundreds were evacuated as rescue operations continued. While in Jakarta, some 138 residents were evacuated from southern and eastern areas of the city, home to 10 million people, after waters reached up to 1.8 meters high in some areas. Indonesia's meteorology agency had warned the heaviest rain of the season may fall in and around the densely populated capital in the coming days, with extreme weather, including heavy rain, thunder, and strong winds, expected throughout next week. Authorities told people to stay alert as Jakarta and its surrounding areas are still in the peak period of the rainy season, which is estimated to continue until the end of February or early March. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again.
سلام للهجانة سلام سلام للهجانة سلام السيف الذهب الذهب.
With a wide participation from the Sultanate and GCC countries, the activities of the 4th edition of the annual Al-Bashar Arabian Camel Racing Festival concluded at Al-Bashar Camel Race Track in the Wilayah of Ad. The British Prime Minister says the G7 is exploring the pandemic preparedness treaty and the United States is back as leader of the free world. And the net direct foreign investment in Sultanate increases by 12% during the first 9 months of 2020. And with the end of tonight's news bulletin, we would like to remind you one more time to keep following the precautionary measures of wearing face masks, washing hands, and keeping physical distance from each other. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studio, it's good night and stay safe.